So Albo finally gets to Alice Springs, but he does so with a fly-in, fly-out daytime visit. Anyone who knows what's been happening there knows, yes, while there is crime that happens during the day, there's an awful lot that is happening towards the end of the day and an awful lot happening at night. Surprise, surprise, the Prime Minister, who didn't want to talk about this in the media, had to be surrounded like a kid holding onto his blankie by the Chief Minister, by the local politicians, rather than just trying to go under his own account and try to talk to locals who are not there to guard the Prime Minister. That's what the Chief Minister was there to do today, to guard the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister says he cares about Indigenous Australia, but we saw today that he cares more about the optics of not caring about Indigenous Australia than actually doing something to help Indigenous Australia. It's one thing to turn up. It's another thing to show up. And forgive me if I don't believe that just by pointing at a couple of things, everything will be fixed. The test for Albanese will be, how does this go tomorrow, the next day, next week? Because he has a Territory Chief Minister in the Labor Party who says that she will not reintroduce alcohol bans. Well, until there are alcohol bans, the crime will remain rampant. What's the Prime Minister's position, apart from saving his ass? To try to change the subject as soon as possible. An interesting new poll shows that while the majority of Australians would vote for The Voice, an extreme majority of Australians have no idea what they would be voting for. The Channel 9 newspapers, which are part of the media that are cheering all day, every day, have now had to admit in the fine print, Australians, and I quote, have heard of it, but don't understand it and would struggle to explain it. Bad for Albo? Labor voters find it the hardest of all voters to explain the Prime Minister's idea at 67%, the Liberal National voters at 64%, and even almost 60% of Greens voters have heard of it, but don't understand it and would struggle to explain it. And this is the central problem for the Prime Minister. While I believe that The Voice is going to pass, and I'll show you some data about why that's the case in a second, the margin by which it passes will be dependent on what people are voting for. Currently, the proposition of the Prime Minister is please vote for something you can't explain. But currently, 60-40 is the national number in favour of The Voice. But what's really important to note is that that is down, not by a huge margin, but still 60-40. Now remember, for a referendum to pass, it is a majority of people in a majority of states. And according to this polling, that would be the case, with yes majorities in every state that has been polled. But have a look at how some of these numbers are changing. In New South Wales, it's down 7%. In Queensland, it's down 3%. In South Australia, it's down 15%. But it's still holding above 70% in places like Tasmania. Now, in terms of politics, you'd prefer to be in the yes camp than the no camp, because when people are voting yes 60-40 and Labor voters are at 67% for what they can't understand, this shows softness. That's why the Prime Minister wants to keep it at the vibe. That's why the Prime Minister went to Alice Springs today, to try to make it seem like he cares about the practical solutions, but really he's about the vibe. He's about the year-long distraction. Now, in terms of the raw numbers, why am I still confident that this thing is going to pass? Because literally you have a scenario where it's 60% of Australians voting yes, meaning the vibe is that popular. The want to do something is that absolute. But the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister alone, is the one who needs to explain what is happening here. How many people? Will they be paid? How do they get replaced? It's not that hard. And stop telling everyone else to go off and do their homework. You need to be honest. Or, of course, the whole point of this exercise is to try to have a year-long distraction. A year-long distraction where we are talking about this and not things like Alice Springs, where the Prime Minister has been dragged kicking and screaming to the reality of life for too many Indigenous people in Australia.